feedback is really a sign of care, not criticism. Apathy is the worst thing you can get from a coach. I'm not going to lower the standard for you. I believe that you can hit that standard. If you care for someone, you want them to achieve their wildest dreams. You only get great in two ways, really. You have a fantastic coach, or you train with people better than you. The job of a parent is to make themselves obsolete. The job of a leader is to do exactly the same thing. Sport teaches you this loop of set a hard goal, put effort in, achieve the goal, see your effort rewarded. That sensation that this is scary, this is difficult, this is high risk, is your signal to move forward into action. And that is courage.
My name is Kyla Colbin. You're listening to my interview with Christie Jenkins, and this is the Hunger and Heart Podcast. Enjoy the show. Hello, my name is Kyla Colbin, and welcome to episode 14 of Hunger and Heart, a podcast on the intersection of wild ambition and fierce compassion. Just before we get into today's episode, a quick note. You may know that we have partnered with Crusaders Rugby to create the Crusaders Leadership Programme. It's a 2-week online-only leadership program for coaches and leaders of teams, not rugby specific. We've had people from all over the world, all different codes, different contexts participate. Anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up is because for our August cohort coming up next month, we have a one-off, very special live Ask Me Anything session with none other than Sir Steve Hansen. So if that's something you're interested in, we have a free info session coming up next week. You can find out more on crusadersleadership.com. Okay, my guest today is Christie Jenkins. If I had to pick a phrase to describe Christie, I would say no limits. Christie was number 1 in Australia and top 10 in the world across 3 different sports: trampolining, CrossFit, and beach volleyball. She is currently the managing director of Techstars Sydney, where she invests in 12 super early stage startups every year. In this conversation, we talk about her obsession with feedback, how we set leaders up to fail in the workplace, and the worst thing a coach can do. So here you are, my conversation with Christie Jenkins. What is your experience with wild ambition and fierce compassion?
This is such an interesting question. I actually really hate the word compassion.
Excellent.
If we can start on a spicy note.
I love it.
I feel like if you go and look up the definition of compassion, it's sympathy plus a desire to help someone. And the reason I don't like the word is because it implies a sense of superiority. Like, I feel bad for you, and from my position of being better than you, I'm going to reach down and help you. And so growing up, my mum always had this saying in our house that sympathy and empathy are not the same thing. Sympathy is, I feel bad for you and I feel those emotions myself too. And empathy is, I can understand your position and put myself in your shoes and understand why you're feeling that emotion, but I don't necessarily need to feel it myself. And so I feel like empathy comes from a place of, I respect you as a strong peer, and maybe you're having a tough moment that I can understand. But I don't look down on you. It's not coming from a position of superiority. So in your question, when we're talking about ambition and compassion, I'd probably replace the word compassion with empathy and caring. And I do like the piece of compassion that says I want to help someone, but I think we can take it out of this position of superiority. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. I love that you started with etymology, because I am a grammar nerd. I'm obsessed with language. And the first thing I will say is there's nothing in what you've said that is counter in any way to my belief. So as much as I would love to have a spicy debate with you on it, it's what you're describing is totally consistent with my belief system. One of the things I've noticed in the work that I do is that there are a number of different definitions of empathy as well. And a lot of people believe that empathy is, I'm going to take on these emotions, I'm going to feel them myself. Mm-hmm. And what you've just described is the kind of empathy that I advocate for, which is what we call cognitive empathy, of I can see and appreciate that you are a human being that is feeling normal human emotions.
Exactly. And so from that point of view, how do you have both together? And I think, I'm coming from the context of sport and having been an elite athlete across three different sports. I think the only question that matters here is, do I see them as a teammate? Because if we're on the same team, then of course I'm going to help you because we're aiming for the same goal. Now, we can define team extremely narrowly. I played an individual sport like trampolining. You compete on your own. If you win, the gold medal's like just for you. But I have training partners that I train with. I have my coach. I would consider them to be teammates. And then often I'm representing my club or my state or my country. And so my sense of team becomes broader. But you can take that even a step further. And, we see so many acts of kindness and empathy in women's sport in particular at the moment, where we're seeing people act in the good of the sport. I want to grow the sport, I want to grow the game, and recognizing my competitors, even though we're competing against each other, as worthy teammates means, yes, I can be ambitious for my own goals, but I want to see the sport grow because that rising tide lifts all boats. And so, are they a teammate? If yes, of course, I'm going to help them. And when we come to work, it's exactly the same question, right? We work at the same company, we're teammates, we're not competing against office politics and things like that. We work in the same industry. Well, are we teammates? Are we trying to grow the industry? And so that's the question I orientate around when I think about combining ambition and empathy.
I love this. One of the things that is relevant here is the context in which the question arose, which is that I regularly get the question from people, look, you can empathize all you want, but at some point you have to get the job done. Now, you have been top one in Australia across three different sports, top 10 in the world across three different sports. You've been quoted as saying you've had coaches who have carried you off the field when you're injured, have stood by you at your dad's funeral, have come back to coach you after an incident that left a teammate paraplegic. And the curiosity that I have here is the intersection, the myth that people carry that caring for you means I am not going to hold you to standards of performance. And what I hear in you is these coaches cared for me, and that is what supported me to achieve a high performance. Can you talk to me a little bit about that tension that some people might hold?
I don't think there is any tension there. I think if you care for someone, you want them to achieve their wildest dreams. And so if I think about the beautiful dynamic of like coach to athlete or leader to employee, what does the coach bring to that relationship that brings the magic? And I think it's belief, right? I believe in your potential. I back you to achieve those goals. And what does the athlete bring to that relationship? And I think it's trust. I trust your expertise as my coach. I trust you have my best interests at heart. I trust you to push me in the right way to achieve my goals. And so that doesn't always show up as a coach saying, I believe in you, right? I think that shows up in things like we set shared goals together. Do you want to go to the Olympics? I believe that you can do that. Let's set that goal together. I want to learn this technically difficult new skill. I want to go after this new avenue of my career that hasn't been done before. And a coach, by agreeing to those shared goals together, is demonstrating their belief. I think belief shows up in raising ambition. So you say, in trampolining, I want to go and learn that triple somersault. And your coach says, well, how about we do the triple somersault with a 1.5 twist? They raise the level of ambition. And so that is also an indication of belief. I think belief shows up in holding high standards and saying, I expect better of you. I know that you can reach this level. I expect you to show up and perform this day. And, I believe that you can hit that standard. I'm not going to lower the standard for you. And I think belief shows up in like high levels of feedback and personalizing your coaching for someone, in that, feedback is really a sign of care, not criticism. Apathy is the worst thing you can get from a coach. Imagine that you showed up to like a golf lesson or a tennis lesson and that coach like watched you hit balls for an hour and said nothing. For starters, you'd want your money back. But beyond that, apathy is like, I don't care about you. Feedback saying, I care enough about you to watch your technique, to watch every stroke, to give you feedback, to trust that you will take that feedback well. And so belief shows up in, across those four different dimensions. And so they are all ways that a coach backs us to achieve our goals. And so I don't think there is any tension between get the job done, have ambitious goals, have high standards, take feedback well, and things we sometimes associate with being a tough coach with caring for someone. I think those things that we consider toughness are a demonstration of care.
I love everything that you're saying. One of the things that I just heard you say was this is the relationship, the beautiful relationship between the coach and athlete. And then you said, or between the leader and the employee.
Mm-hmm.
In the same place I found that line about those coaches who've stood by you, you follow that up with saying you haven't seen that kind of behavior in managers so much. What do you think stops us as leaders in office environments or in business environments from showing up for our people in the same way those coaches who believe in you show up for you in a sports environment?
Many things. One is a skill set thing, right? Uh, we don't train leaders very well in the workplace. We promote someone based on their capacity as an individual contributor, and then we just expect them to lead a team. We haven't told them how to lead. We haven't taught them that skill set. Here's how you personalize your coaching of employees. Here's how you set goals together. Here's how you raise standards. Here's how you give feedback. Here's how you do performance reviews. Like all of those essential elements of leadership, that's a skill set, not something you magically have as soon as you're promoted into the role. So that's probably the first issue. Then I think we misalign incentives and cultures sometimes at work. And so, I have a long background in venture capital. I think that industry is like particularly bad at coaching. For starters, they have that myth of uh, we use an apprenticeship model. And so when I joined my first VC fund, the advice I got was, well, just go and meet a ton of founders. And like once you've had 1,000 founder meetings, you'll start to develop good investment judgment, which is crazy. Like imagine I put a tennis racket in your hand and said, well, just go to the court and hit 1,000 balls and maybe eventually you'll get it. Right. And
Also, what a
so
disservice to the 999 founders.
I know those poor founders. And so like that's one, like a terrible way to coach, and that's like a myth that's like part of that industry. But two, the incentives are all wrong. So venture capital typically runs on a partnership model. The better someone gets, the more they're going to want to be promoted to the partner level, which means you get less carry and financial rewards. And then the other piece is every minute you spend coaching someone in your team is a minute that you're not doing a deal yourself. And often you're incentivized and rewarded based on the deals you do yourself. And so all the incentives are skewed and wrong, which just leads to the wrong culture and doesn't really generate a culture of leadership.
Can I make sure I've understood this correctly? So
Mm.
if I'm a venture capitalist and I've got someone coming onto the team, what I'm hearing you say, I just want to make sure I've understood it accurately. What I'm
Mm-hmm.
hearing you say is, if I coach you to get better, you're going to become a partner, which is going to take away some of my money. And if I coach you to get better, that's going to take away time that I could be spending doing deals and bringing in more money. And so therefore my incentives are to leave you alone and in a way almost hope that you don't get that much better that quickly. Have I understood that correctly?
Yeah, like I'm happy for you to do the grunt work of like going and finding deals and like, doing analysis on all of those things. But I'm still the partner here, and you don't want your position to be under threat under the long term. And so actually you see a lot of people like go into VC for 2 years and then like exit that firm. It's pretty common.
So does this
Um,
tie back to what you were saying earlier about do I see you as a teammate or not in the context of is our success intertwined?
yes, I think that's right. Um, I think I'm going to quote my mum here,
I love
who
your mom
said
and
the
I'm going to
job of
ask
a
you about your mom. So
yeah,
go on.
okay. So she always said the job of a parent is to make themselves obsolete. And I think the job of a leader is to do exactly the same thing. Are you so insecure as a leader that if someone reached your level, you're worried about your job? Or are you also growing enough as a leader so that by the time you bring someone up to your level, you're on the level above? And so, yeah, make yourself obsolete.
Incredible. Incredible. I literally was contemplating this exact dynamic this morning in the car, thinking, contemplating the things that I believe about leadership or about work life, professional life that many people don't believe. And one of
Mm.
them was that we should walk into the office going, anyone can do my job. So what should I be doing in order to continue to learn and grow and to hand it off rather than trying to keep my domain protected from other people and try to make myself indispensable in this particular role.
Then you can never take a holiday either.
Exactly. You can never take a holiday.
Yeah.
And also, when you do fall over, you'll find out that actually we are all replaceable. Yeah. Let's talk about your mom. I love your mom. Your mom. Okay, so two things already you've brought up with her. One is sympathy versus empathy. The other is the job of a parent to make themselves obsolete. Your mom was an author, and she also, a thing that I understand she did that I find really fascinating was she doesn't seem like she coddled you very much. Was like, if you want to do trampolining, no problem. I'm not going to get up early. Learn how to braid your own hair. You want to train more than twice a week, take yourself to the training. Talk to me about your mom, your relationship with your mom, what she was like, and how that shaped you as a world-class athlete and as a leader.
Yeah, she was very hands off. Like
Is she still with us?
both of my, oh yeah, she is.
Okay.
Um, my dad passed away when I was
I'm
20.
sorry.
My dad was almost more involved in my sporting career growing up. And so he was the one that was like on the like council for my gymnastics club. He would come and like film me competing at trampoline competitions. My mum said, I'm going to show up to one competition a year. You can choose which one. And then she wouldn't even come for the whole day. She'd be like, okay, you're competing at 11:27. She's like, I'll be there at 11:15 and I'll stay until 12 and then I'm going home. And like fair enough, it's actually kind of boring to watch hundreds of kids, at 10 years old do trampolining routines. But it gives you the spirit of like she was very supportive, very loving, backed us to do our goals, but also was like, you have to do it yourself. If you want this, you're in the driver's seat. It's your motivation. If you want to go to training, find your own way there, take the bus, get a carpool. If you want to compete more and compete overseas, like raise the money, get yourself overseas. And so I definitely wouldn't say my parents were pushy parents, supportive, but no way pushy.
And what impact do you think that had on you?
Well, I always knew it was my decision to keep going, right? And one of the incredible things about sport, and I think this is why we see that so many leaders are like former athletes, especially female leaders, right? That research is really fascinating, is because sport teaches you this loop of set a hard goal, put effort in, achieve the goal, see your effort rewarded, and round in that circle. And I remember I think I was 8 and qualified for my first ever national championships in the under 11 category, which is really just like 9 and 10-year-olds. And so I was pretty young. I'd won the state championships. So I went into nationals being like, I'm pretty good at this sport, thinking, you know, I'm going to win nationals because I've won everything else that I've done to date in this sport. And I
eight
came
years old
dead
in
8 years old.
in under 11. So you're competing against
Yeah,
10-year-old. Okay, go on.
yeah. And I came dead last, like flat out bottom of the entire stack after doing like a good routine. I didn't like fall or stumble or anything. And I just remember being absolutely crushed, like sobbing in my dad's arms. And like, he was like, do you want some chocolate? I was like, I don't deserve it. And, um, but like coming out of that moment, it's like, okay, well, do you still want to do this sport? That my parents put it to me. And I was like, yes. And I don't want to lose again like that. And so I remember going back to training and being like, I want to train more sessions a week. That difficult skill that I refused to learn before, I'm going to go tackle that skill. I'm going to let my coaches push me even harder. I'm going to train with a squad that's older than me, even though it's less socially comfortable. I know that will make me a better athlete. And so, even at 8, you see that loop of like, fail, set a goal, work hard. And then I came back the next year at 9 and won the under 11s at nationals, and then like went on to win 12 years in a row, the national title. And so that loop is reinforced many, many times over. And I think that's the thing that sports teaches you. And my mum being and my dad being like relatively hands off allowed me to learn that loop very early.
I hear you on this. I don't want to put myself in your shoes. Your mom reminds me of my mom. My mom passed away 10 years ago, but my mom was very much like, okay, you want to do it? Go figure it out. When I was 15, I wanted to go do a semester in Italy. She was like, great, sort it out. Find a school, call them, apply. And this was, pre-internet, right? Figure out how to get there, organize the meeting, do what you got to do. And she loved me totally. And she created space for that intrinsic motivation as well as self-sufficiency. I feel really grateful to have had that kind of upbringing because I feel like I carry it with me every single day where I walk around going, if I want to do something, I can just figure it out and make it happen. And, nothing feels kind of impossible to me. Do you believe that this is something that we were fortunate genetically to have, that when we were given that space, we stepped into it, or you stepped into it with, okay, fine, I'm going to do the harder thing. I'm going to train with the older people. I'm going to learn the more difficult skill. Or do you think that is something that anyone given sufficient space plus encouragement could develop into?
I lean very, very far on the scale of growth mindset and nurture over nature and the ability for people to change not just their skill set, but their mindset and their character, because I've seen it so many times, right? Now, imagine if I had been in that position, lost my first nationals, put in all of that work, went back to nationals next year and still came last. That might have killed that loop and that drive at that point, right? And so that does happen to kids. And I've seen many, many athletes change their character over time, right? If you think about a skill that we would typically consider relatively innate, something like resilience or competitiveness or sportsmanship, like those are skills. Athletes can learn those mental attributes. And so it's up to us to, if you're a parent, how do you create the environment for your kid to learn that? And I've played 3 sports professionally. And I think it's extremely ironic when people are like, you're so lucky you found your passion. And I think that's crazy because, I started my third sport, beach volleyball, like in my early 20s. I'd never played before. I was complete rubbish. And I just kind of, picked it off the list of like, well, I think I probably have some potential in this. Like, let's give it 6 months and see if it sticks. And 12 years later, people are like, you're so lucky you found your passion. I'm like, no, I built my passion over time. And so selecting the task matters. If you pick a task or a sport that you are just completely ungifted at, you'll never be good. And being good at something does drive passion and enjoyment and skill. So that's helpful. And I think kids tend to have a predisposition between, obviously their physicality. Are you short or tall? Should you play gymnastics or basketball? Do you have fast twitch or slow twitch muscles? Should you do the 100 meters or the 5,000 meters? Um, and maybe a predisposition towards like team or individual sports. Like, should you play tennis or should you play soccer? Um, but like once you find something that's like a good match for you, and it may not even be sport, you may be like, I should do music or drama or whatever. How do you create the environment so that you have that reward loop for yourself where I see effort and effort pays off? And that then is the Kickstarter to allow you to be like, I'm going to build my character in these ways. I'm going to become competitive. I'm going to set goals. I'm going to be a good teammate. I'm going to show sportsmanship to my competitors because sport's an environment that allows you to learn all of those skills. So I am far on the growth mindset spectrum of even your character is malleable.
Amazing. Just to bring a little spice into this, I am also far on the growth mindset spectrum. And I also believe that even my ability to be on the growth mindset spectrum is something that I didn't control having that as part of me.
Well, isn't there research that shows as soon as you teach someone about growth mindset, they have more of it?
Yes, yes. Yeah, this is a topic like I get deep into this, right? Because I talk on our team we talk about this stuff all the time, and I absolutely teach that thing of going the way things are today does not mean the way things will always be. That we have the ability to gain a greater sense of agency. I teach this stuff all day, every day, and I am also so aware that the opportunity to be in the moment where someone's teaching about growth mindset emerged because of a whole series of things. And so I also have this thing of I don't actually know if we have free will. Let's get super like people say to me, "Oh, you've worked so hard for what you do," and yeah, sure, I work hard, but my inclination to work hard, I didn't go and get that. The privilege that I got from the parents that I had, and the education that I had, and the connections that I made in high school that to this day are supporting me. None of that is stuff that
Mm.
that came out of nowhere. I guess is what I'm saying.
Of course, the starting line is different for everyone, but everybody still has way more potential than they think.
You mentioned starting beach volleyball and being rubbish at it. I did a lot of prep for this call. I'm so excited to talk to you. I heard you describe coming into beach volleyball from trampolining and leaping up to hit the ball and missing entirely. There's a piece there of further to our growth mindset conversation, when we're engaging in any kind of new skill or activity, we have to go through this kind of cringe minefield in order to get any good at it. The only way to gain experience is by doing the thing when we don't have any experience at it. And so my question to you is, coming from an environment where you were won the national champs 12 years in a row, top 10 in the world, da da da, how do you then recalibrate yourself to be willing and to embrace the stage of cringe minefield that you had to go through in this new context?
It took me 30 years to unpick this, but eventually I realized that what I love most about sport and what really drives my passion for it is a sense of progress. Do I feel like I'm improving? That's one. Second is a sense of mastery. Do I feel like I'm good at this? Now, for that reason, starting a new sport is actually not the worst period for me because you're crap, but you improve every day. The sense of progress is crazy. As soon as you get good, your sense of progress slows way, 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 way down because of diminishing returns, right? If you think of, what it takes, like Federer or Alcaraz to improve their tennis swing, it's like 10 million reps and they get like 0.5% better. You know, I am also terrible at tennis. I go to my first tennis lesson, I improved 100% in one lesson. And so the beginning is not the worst phase for me. Like, you've got to be willing to laugh at yourself because, damn, it was embarrassing at times. The toughest phase for me is, 3 years into a sport where you've publicly committed to being chasing down, playing for the country, playing at the top level, and yet you're still not good, but you're also not improving very quickly. And so that, years 3 and 4 and even 5 were like really tough grind years for me where I've made this commitment, I'm not going back on it, but I'm not really loving it because I don't have the sense of progress and I don't have the sense of mastery. And I'm just like kind of somewhere in the middle in terms of athletic ranking. And it kind of sucks. Um, and you didn't ask this, but how did I break out of what felt like a plateau? It's not really a plateau. Your rate of progress has slowed. I said, okay, you only get great in two ways, really. You have a fantastic coach or you train with people better than you. And I said, well, I already have a fantastic coach, but I'm not really in a training environment with players that are pushing me to reach their level. And so quit my job, went to the US, and just camped out in California for 8 months, and there's one suburb in California called Hermosa Beach where every single top player in the US moves to live and train. And I was like, that's where I need to be to get good. And I played volleyball twice a day, 2 hours a session for 8 months straight. Came back, had a breakout season, won my first national tour event in Australia, made the Australian team for the first time. I was like, okay, you gotta fuel the sense of progress.
Amazing. What I'm hearing there is that model that takes us from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence to conscious competence to unconscious competence. And it sounds like for you, the frustrating point is the point just in between conscious incompetence and conscious competence. Is that, have I understood that correctly?
I mean, I think for me, in any sport, you have different skills at different levels on that curve. And so, beach volleyball, it's like, okay, well, I learned to set the ball, and that skill came pretty naturally. And so I reached a level of very high competence, like very quickly. But at the same time, I could eventually put my hand on the ball and hit it. But it was really like every time I like had to concentrate for that. And so like I had all these different skills on like different parts of the curve. So it's maybe unfair to lump the entire sport into you're at this stage of it because some things come natural and some things have unconscious competence and that sense of mastery and flow. And some skills, even today, past the peak of my career, I am still like, man, I got to think about that.
I know you've said there are three characteristics for any world class athlete, and you've just said great coaches and training with people who are better than you. What's the third?
Killer work ethic.
That's the I'm going to train twice a day, 2 hours a day, every day, and I'm going to do what I have to
Yeah.
do to get past this, what feels like a plateau in this moment.
Yes, exactly.
You mentioned that it took you 30 years to unpick this, and that what you've realized is one of the things that drives you is growth. I've heard you say that your core value has migrated from winning to growth. Can you talk to me about that process of unpicking how you got from one to the other and what it means for growth to take a higher priority for you than winning?
Mm. So at 20, my list of values was topped by winning and being the best. At 30, early 30s, we switched to this order, which was top three growth, number one, team, number two, and winning and being the best, number three. So it's still on the list. How did I unpick that? I think doing multiple sports allowed me to see that more clearly. In that I looked over the course of that career and I was like, well, which moments of each sport have been the most fulfilling to me? And I've always been someone that loved training. Like competition is fun. It's awesome. I love that, being on the big stage in the big stadium moment. But if you don't love training, you're probably not going to make it as an athlete. And so, what is it that you love about training? What are the days that are most fulfilling? And it's the days you make progress. And so, it really took like looking back over my whole career across multiple sports to uncover that because there are many things I love about sport, but what was the one thing that really drove me? Either that or I'm just a slow learner. It took me 30 years to come to that realization. And then why the change in values into that order? So growth became number one because of that realization. It's like actually that's what drives all of the effort I put into sport, that sense of joy from progress. Team became number two because of two reasons. One, you are never doing it alone. You're relying on your coach, you're relying on your teammates, you're relying on your parents, you're relying on the support of fans and like people backing you and all of those things. And so it's actually impossible to get to the top without the support of others. And then once you're at the top, you don't enjoy it unless you have someone to celebrate it with. And so team became number second because I said growth and team enable winning and being the best. And so while I still value that, you have to point at the process and the inputs, which is growth and team, in order to get the output, which is winning.
Thank you for walking me through that. I so appreciate it. I love this phrase that you just used, joy from progress. Joy is another word that I'm big on. How can we bring joy into everything that we do, into performance, into our work ethic, into the commitments and the ambitions that we have? I've heard you describe your third sport, which we haven't talked about yet, CrossFit, as the sport of suffering. Can you talk to me about how joy and suffering, the relationship between those two things?
Well, as soon as you stop, it's nice. Um,
Do you know one of the things I say, like I say this about hard conversations, which is that I feel about hard conversations the same way I feel about working out, which is that I'm always happy to have had done it.
yes, that is true. Yeah, CrossFit is rough. Like, it really taught me how do you feel the pain and then go even harder? Because you're doing these crazy workouts. Like, imagine showing up and being like, okay, do like 50 pull-ups in a row, and then like pick a 70-kilo barbell up, put it over your head, and like squat it 10 times, and then, run 3 kilometers, and then come back and do like 100 burpees. And, it just sounds insane. And then you're like, cool, that's one event. You have 15 more to go. And like, that's the CrossFit Games, right? It is really the pinnacle of fitness, and it's of all the sports I've played, it's one that I would say is your outcome in competition is most determined by what you do in training. In a ball sport or in a trampolining gymnastics sport, your performance on the day, your range of performance can vary quite widely, based on your mentality on the day. Did you fall off the trampoline or not? What your opponents are like, what the conditions are like. But CrossFit is pretty controlled conditions. You know all the movements. You don't know what the exact events are going to be in advance. But if you hurt in training enough, you're going to do well in competition. If you took your foot off the gas in training, you're going to not do well in competition. And so, can you train yourself to like feel that lactic acid burn, feel like the your breath rasping in and out of your throat, and be like, okay, this is the signal to go even harder, which is it's just suffering, honestly. Um, and so where is the joy in CrossFit? I actually mostly did team events in CrossFit. And so the joy came from my teammates. I was better at squatting, my teammate was better at pull-ups. And so we like shared the load between us. Um, and the moment of like celebration, like watching your teammate make a lift of a weight they've never done before under the big lights in the stadium, and that score like going towards your team winning, like that's the moment you want to celebrate. That moment where you as a team like tackle a workout in synchronization and they push you to go harder than you probably would have done alone. You might have like dropped the barbell or taken a rest on your own, but because you had teammates side by side, you pushed each other to a new level. Like that unlocks just this immense like feeling of satisfaction and progress. And as I said, as soon as the workout's over, that's when you feel the joy.
What I'm hearing there is that actually there's a huge amount of joy because it's hard, because you've managed to do a hard thing and push yourself to do a hard thing. The level of satisfaction that comes from that is far greater than if you had just hung out on the couch.
Yeah, type 2 fun,
Right.
right?
Tell me about type 2 fun. I've heard this before, but I don't know. Tell me the.
Okay, well, like type 1 fun is like hedonistic. It's eating a piece of chocolate cake, it's like partying with your friends at the club. Type 2 fun is the satisfaction you feel from doing hard things.
Hmm. Excellent. Type 2 fun. Bring it on. I also want to combine what something that you just said with something you'd said previously, which was you just talked about how CrossFit is the sport where what you do in training has the greatest impact on your outcome on the day. And what we were just talking about in terms of your shift from your value of winning to your value of growth. I remember having a conversation. I've got three stepsons, and I remember having a conversation with my oldest when he was, he maybe was like 8, and he was playing soccer. And he had taken a shot on goal in a game and missed. And he came out from the game and he was all bummed out that he missed his shot on goal. And I told him that apocryphal story about the two groups that are given that are being taught how to learn how to make clay pots. And one group is told, in 6 months, we're going to come back, and your job is to make the best possible pot you can make. And the other group is told, in 6 months, we're going to come back, and your job is to make as many pots as you can possibly make. And so then I said to 8-year-old Lucky, which group do you think made the better pots? And he was like, the group that was told to make the better pots. And I was like, no, the group that was told to make as many pots as possible, because I was like, your job right now is to take as many shots on goal as you possibly can, because you're going to learn 500 ways of how it works, how it curves, what happens when you hit it this way, when you kick it that way, when you use your toe and use your side. Anyway, and coming back to your shift in value from winning to growth and combining with what you just said in terms of training for CrossFit, is it possible that having a commitment to training, you said you get joy from training more than you get from competition, that having that joy from training, having that commitment to growth, having that focus on, I am going to invest so heavily in this, is actually what leads to a greater potential for winning than if the focus is on winning itself?
It's a good question. I think people are different, right? And so for some people, just winning and beating other people like is the drive that works for them. I always I kind of had this taught to me, let's say, by my beach volleyball partners, because I thought everyone was like me, and they played better as soon as there was more pressure, and I was like, of course, every athlete must be like that. Uh, I got a rude awakening that that is not the case because I used to put all this pressure on my beach volleyball partner. We'd come up to like the end of a close game and be like, oh, you have to make this serve. Like the whole championship is on the line. And then she would just serve 5 meters out the back. And I was like, what the hell, And turns out not everybody is driven by the same thing. And so what increases your chances of winning might not increase my chances of winning. I tend to think like most athletes and probably most people fall into one of four buckets. I call them the four Ps because it's a nice, easy acronym. But I think there are process-driven people who love, give me the list, let me break down goals into like all of these steps and like let me tick off each one as I go. I think there are pressure-driven people, and I definitely fall in this camp where if you just give me a realistic goal, I'm like, ugh, sounds like it belongs on my to-do list. I'm not motivated at all. I want the like crazy, wild, seemingly impossible goal with the like tough deadline. And that's what I get excited by. And the more you add more pressure, you add more expectations, you add an audience, I'm going to do better. I think the third group is perfection. And so these people have a drive towards mastery and doing it right. And they're actually incredibly resilient. Like perfection has this like negative connotation these days, like I'm too much of a perfectionist. But actually, those people are highly resilient because they keep getting back up until they've done it correctly. And so, they would need a different set of motivation in order to increase their winning. And then the last group is play. And these people just love the game. They enjoy doing it. They enjoy doing it with other people. And you add pressure or you add process or you add structure to those people and they do worse. Like think of the coder that just like can geek out until 4 in the morning on their laptop in their dark cave. And they just like love what they're doing. And I had a beach volleyball partner. She was such a natural player. And all you had to do was make it fun. And she was play out of her skin. And so does what makes me good at winning is more pressure. What makes someone who is driven by play better at winning? More fun. What makes someone that's driven by process better at winning? Like laying out that like this competition and this result is a stepping stone to the next one and the next one. What makes someone who's better at perfection better at winning? Well, like clearly outlining like this is what a masterful performance looks like and like focusing on their own performance and doing that correctly. And so everyone's different.
What a fantastic framework. One of the things that I love about you is your frameworks. I find them so useful and valuable in terms of the way that I think about things. And what I've just heard you say is something that's been so consistent from so many of the coaches that I've spoken with, Sir Wayne Smith, Sir Graham Henry, this thing of you have to see the player in front of you. You have to see the whole person first and then the player. And you have to respond to what this person needs in this moment and not to your idea of what a generic average athlete might need in this moment.
Yes, the best coaches and the best leaders personalize
Mm-hmm.
their coaching.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the mentality that you bring to your work with CrossFit, with competition, that you're pressure driven. Sometimes, of course, we're dependent on things that are outside of our control, the way the judge happens to like or dislike the smile on your face or whatever it might be. You had an
There's still a few
experience.
judges I have an issue with.
There's still, well, so I might be asking you about one of them. You had an experience at a world championship that maybe brought some of that into play, coming in eighth equal. Can you tell me about that experience?
I mean, I've had more than one experience like this.
Mm-hmm.
Look, my overarching perspective is you should be good enough that a slight difference in judging or scoring doesn't matter. You know, if you win the 50-meter swimming race by a whole second, it doesn't matter that the scoring mechanism faltered. If you win a beach volleyball game 21-12, it doesn't matter if the ref gave the team another point when they didn't deserve it. And so that is my overarching philosophy. In the moment, I do not always find it easy to reach that mindset when you are in a tight game or a tough situation. And so, like, two that spring to mind is trampolining world championships. 100 of the best athletes show up, eight make finals. And I went out, I did a fantastic routine. There's a known phenomenon in trampolining where the earliest heats get judged more harshly, and then the latest heats get judged more favorably. And I was like unlucky enough to be in the draw for the first heat, did a fantastic routine, was very happy with it, was like sitting in a great position. And then like all the heats are happening, and I'm like still sitting in the top eight, still in the top eight, still in the top eight until like, one of the very last athletes goes and she tied my score. Now, she's in the last heat, so maybe she shouldn't have tied it based on like easier judging, but not for me to call. We tied our scores. We both sit on equal eighth. Now, trampolining just has these arbitrary tie-break rules, and they're like, well, she had higher difficulty, you had higher execution, and so she's in the final and you're out. It's like crushing, right? Another situation is at the World Beach Games, which is like the Olympics for all the beach and action sports in the world. So we're playing four-a-side beach volleyball, a new format. In the bronze medal match of like effectively the Olympics for this sport, uh, in the third set, so super, super tight game, on match point, the referee gave the point to the opposing team after they touched the ball four times. You're only allowed to touch it three times in volleyball. The entire crowd is chanting four, 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 and the referee wouldn't change his mind, wouldn't do a video review, gave the match to the opposing team. We lost the bronze medal on that one bad referee call. It's like, you can tell I'm still dirty about these situations. But I'm like, wow, maybe you should have just been better.
Can I just say one of the things I love so much about what you've just said is that recognition of, yes, overarching, my higher self, in my best self knows that I should just be better. And my human self is like, well, this kind of fucking sucks. Like, how come there's a huge frustration there. And I love this because I have this dichotomy all the time. Even the conversation we were just having about growth mindset versus free will, or growth mindset versus, nature versus nurture, where I feel like, yes, I am so growth mindset all day, every day. And I don't think that I grew to have the growth, anyway, whatever. Um, so my question here is, in that moment where I'm imagining, I'm making up stories about you. I'm imagining frustration and fury and resentfulness and whatever, all the things. And I know you're the pressure driven person and not the process driven person. And also, I'm hearing all the frameworks that you have. Do you have a routine or a system? How do you go through working through that emotional state to go, okay, I'm still salty about it, and now I can set it aside and get back to work, or whatever it might be? Do you have a process there, or is it just something that evolves over time? Over time.
Yeah, I have a process. I let myself be upset for the more disappointing it is, the longer that phase takes. It's anywhere from a few hours to a few days and even up to a week. Um, and I let myself like just be upset. I then distract myself and to like give myself a bit of mental space, right? So I'm not like in it, reliving it, being pissed off about it. Um, and so I'll just distract myself first. And then after that, I can start to like more rationally like think about that situation. It's like, well, how do we end up down match point? Um, and so I can think back through the like actual situation and be like, okay, well, it wasn't just at one point. Like there were all these other moments in the game that you could have done things better. Then I scale out and say, well, like let's reframe this in the context of your entire career. And so zooming out and looking at a bigger timeline does help me put that moment in perspective. And then I go back to training, right? You back in the rhythm of training, back to setting another goal, back to trying to improve your skill set, back to trying to make it so that you win 21-12 and you don't lose on match point on a tight game. And that's the process.
A fantastic process. This thing about mindset is so fascinating to me. And I know you have described yourself as being obsessed with psychology and the lessons from high performance sport and how they apply elsewhere. I've also heard you talk about the difference in how what a constructive physical response to pressure looks like in trampolining versus a constructive physical response to pressure in volleyball. And my question for you is there a difference in our mental response in your experience or in your belief or for you personally? Is there a difference in a constructive mental response to pressure in those two environments? And then how does that translate into our mental response to pressure in the workplace?
So to give your listeners like context on what you just referenced, in trampolining, the correct response to pressure is to squeeze every muscle in your body as tight as you can because that will enhance your performance. The tighter you squeeze your muscles, the more vertical your takeoff, the cleaner your lines, the better it looks to the judges, the more control you have. In a ball sport, if you respond to pressure by squeezing every muscle in your body as tight as you can, the ball will just ricochet off in a random direction. And so the correct response to pressure is to relax more, to be more loose, to flow in the moment, to react to the ball. And so I had to unlearn the physical response to pressure that I developed in trampolining and like relearn the physical response in beach volleyball, which was very tough for me because in my head I had this identity of I'm good at pressure. I play better under pressure. And then I'd get to these situations in volleyball. I'm like, this is a high pressure moment and I'm playing worse. And it was incredibly frustrating. And it was just the wrong physiological response. So I had to relearn that and retrain that. Now, the mental response is somewhat the same across every field. And so think of all the high pressure moments in your life, sporting competition, giving a big presentation, having a tough conversation, standing on the edge of the bungee jumping thing about to go off. And what is your mental reaction to pressure? Well, if you're someone that says, I hate pressure, I'm scared, versus you're someone that says, I love pressure, I'm excited, your self talk matters a lot. Um, the other tool I use a lot here is relabeling emotions. And so if you think of the sensations in your body when you feel a moment of pressure, it's like your heart is racing, you have butterflies in your stomach, you feel slightly nauseous, your muscles feel like a little jittery and shaky. Now, as an athlete, when I feel those sensations, I'm like, I'm excited. This is a moment of high excitement. You could also label all of those sensations, I am scared. This is a moment of high fear. And so this is another tool in the toolkit you can use of like, well, what is the label you are giving your emotions? And then what is the self-talk that comes off the back of that to allow you to react to high pressure, high expectation moments in a positive way, no matter what domain that you're in.
Again, so much alignment with the work that I do. One of the things that I talk about all the time is that our emotions are physical experience plus story. And
Mhm.
I love public speaking. It's something I do a lot of, something I feel competent at. And every single time before I go on stage, my heart starts pounding. my pits get sweaty, I get butterflies in my tummy. And because I've done so much of it and I love it, most people hate public speaking. And so most people, if they're about to go on stage and they're having those physical sensations, they'd be like, this is a disaster. I can't go on. I'm going to fail so badly. It's going to be terrible. Me, because I love it. I'm about to go on. I get heart pounding, sweaty pits, butterflies in my tummy. I'm like, great. Where's the microphone? Let's go.
Yes. So maybe let's talk about the difference between courage and confidence. I think it's really interesting that everybody wants more confidence because they don't want to feel scared, right? When you go into something and you feel confident, you know you can do it. Like you get in your car to drive, you know you can drive, right? You're not scared. But actually, all growth happens sort of on the edge of fear, right? And if you're in a situation like, someone standing up to give a big presentation and you feel scared, right? Or you feel those physical sensations, no matter what you label them, there's a stretch here, right? Now, you can reduce that sensation by increasing your competence. So, are you better at the skill set? Now, you've done many speeches, you know that you're going to nail it, you know you're good, you know the audience reaction will be good. And so, you've increased your competence, right? The other way is to like reduce the risk. And so, you could put 10 people in the audience that are like not important people, or you could put 1,000 people in the audience that are like the heads of state of every country. And so, what's the risk level to you personally? And um, I always say that courage is greater than confidence. You should aspire to have more courage, not more confidence. And so I'm thinking like, yes, you want to grow your skill set. In certain situations, you might want to reduce the risk level. But that sensation that this is scary, this is difficult, this is high risk, this is making me feel uncomfortable is your signal to like move forward into action. And that is courage.
Beautiful. I've also heard you talk about 4 different types of confidence. Can you talk to me about those?
Yeah, sure. Okay, let's start with what I would call unwarranted confidence. And so think of your teenage boy bragging that he's going to get the girl, right? And the girl's like, absolutely no chance in hell would I ever go out with him. And so it's sort of this bravado. That's the type of confidence you don't ever really want. The second type of confidence I would call temporary confidence. It is the gymnast about to attempt a difficult skill they're not sure they can do, and they're talking themselves into it. It is the person about to go into a big meeting and like doing a power pose and giving themselves some affirmations and being like, you've got this, you can do this. So it's this momentary boost in confidence that you can give yourself to get yourself started, right? On a difficult, scary thing. It doesn't last, but it is useful in the moment. The third type of confidence is confidence based on competence. So you have the skill, you can do this, you've done it before, you are repeating a skill you already have. Driving a car, for me, doing a double backflip. I've done 10,000 of them. It is a skill that comes easily. And then the final type of confidence, which I think is really interesting, is what I would call meta confidence. And it is this sense that I don't know how to do this thing, but I have done other hard things before, and I back myself to figure it out, to learn how to do it, to persist in the face of setbacks or feedback or challenges, and to ultimately master this new thing. And so those are the 4 types of confidence: unwarranted, um, temporary, competence based, and meta confidence.
It sounds like meta confidence is also very tied to what you were just saying in terms of courage. That
Yes.
meta confidence is the thing that lets me feel that super uncomfortable feeling and go, I've felt this uncomfortable feeling before. I know that that's where growth happens. I know it might be cringe at the beginning. I might completely whiff the ball when I go to hit it. And I also know that I can get through this and get to some learning or insight or greater competence at the far end of it.
Yes. Now we started this call like talking about definitions. And so I would say the difference between meta confidence and courage is action. So confidence is a feeling, and courage is feeling fear plus taking action.
Beautiful. I love your specificity. It brings me so much joy. Um, my second last question. I've heard you describe basketball as a valuable sport in terms of its combination of team aspect plus individual accountability? I'm generally curious about this. In other words, on any team sport, I would imagine you have to be individually accountable in order for the team to thrive. What is it about basketball in particular that evokes that association for you? Yeah, I'm just generally curious about this.
Um, Two things. So one is team size. The bigger the team gets, if you were playing Australian rules football, there's 18 people on the field. And so your contribution to the win or your responsibility for the loss is quite difficult to unpick when there's 18 people on the field. Basketball only has five. So if you're looking for a team sport that still teaches this sense of personal accountability, I'm quite a big fan of basketball. The other reason it's an interesting sport is we talk about sports that have strongest link or weakest link outcomes. And so basketball is the strongest link outcome type of team in that it is, it's virtually impossible to win the NBA championships without superstars on your team. They drive an outsized amount of success. Soccer or football, depending on what country you're in, is a weakest link sport. It's so low scoring, and goals typically happen because of someone's error. And so it is the weakest person on the team that often drives the outcome of the game. And so I think strongest link sports are a little better at teaching personal accountability in a positive way. And so that's why I like basketball. I've actually never played it. And so this is like judging from afar, I would say. And I've played sports, trampolining is an individual sport, beach volleyball is in pairs, and then CrossFit is up to teams of, four. And so I've always played relatively small team sports because I really love that sense of personal accountability. Like win or lose, I know it's on me. And I like to get that learning out of sport.
Beautiful. I know my colleague Hannah is going to be very excited because she's been talking about the strong link sports versus weak link sports. So it's a super relevant topic. My final question for you: You're working in venture capital now. You talked about being super interested in the psychology of high performance in sport, how that translates to business. What are some of the either lessons that you've learned that you think we could be applying better, or some of the ways in which your sporting experience has influenced or informed the way that you approach your current work in venture capital?
The reason I love working in venture capital and investing, so for context for people, I'm the managing director at Techstars, which is a global startup accelerator, and I run the Australian program. The reason I love this space, working in startups, working with founders, is if you think of the mindset of an athlete and you think of the mindset of a founder, they are almost identical. These are people that are so rare in that they take this wildly ambitious goal, um, change the world by building X company or, become an Olympic gold medalist. The odds of success are tiny. And yet these people are still willing to dedicate decades of their lives to achieving it. Those are the people I want to hang out with. So this is why I love what I get to do, which is like back early stage entrepreneurs and founders right at the beginning, even just when they have an idea or they've, built an MVP and just like have a couple of customers. Um, I think, what should we learn from sport and apply to these fields? And this goes beyond startups to all the industries I've worked in. I think we should do two things. One, we should unlock more ambition and support and cheer for that. I think this is particularly relevant for like Australia, New Zealand, British type cultures. We suppress ambition in these countries, and that does nobody a great service, right? You can be ambitious and still be humble. You don't have to be an asshole about it. And we want to lift people up and say, what is your wildest dream? How can we support you to achieve that? Because that's going to make the world better for all of us. And so I want to see us celebrate ambition on the one hand. And the other thing that I'm just obsessed with is feedback. I think we do this so well in sport. Like, I'm obsessed by feedback. I'm like, coach, pay attention to me. Like, give me some critiques, right? Like, tell me more things to fix. And then you come to work and you say to someone in your team, hey, I've got some feedback for you, and they panic, you know? And so, but feedback is this incredible driver of growth. And if I could change anything about the way we do work in the world, it would be just like grow the obsession for feedback.
What a great place to bring our conversation full circle. You said right at the beginning, feedback is care, not criticism. It was one of the things that leapt out at me and burrowed its way into my brain and that I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my days. Christie, it's been such an honor to talk to you. I feel so inspired by our conversation. I feel really pumped. I want to go out and slay some dragons. I've enjoyed so much all of your insights, your frameworks, your personal stories. Thank you for taking this time to talk to me.
Thank you so much. This was awesome. Thank you so much for listening. I loved talking to Christie, and I don't know if it's total arrogance on my part, but I found her really relatable. Like I saw myself in her, specifically her focus on accountability, learning, and growth, and also her mom. I love her mom, and I feel like her mom and my mom would have gotten along really well. I will say Christie, is far more skilled than I am at creating clear frameworks. I really loved her 4 Ps of process, progress, perfection, and play. I loved her 4 types of confidence. I loved her process for how to reset after a setback. She is just an absolute legend, and I feel so inspired right now. Thanks again for listening. Please do let me know your feedback. You can reach me at hello@kylacolbin.com. And of course, like, subscribe, follow. I am grateful for your offerings to the algorithm gods. Thanks again, and have a great day. Hunger and Heart is brought to you by the Crusaders Leadership Programme. Whether you're coaching under fives or a professional team, we all want the same thing: to build a culture of trust, to get the best out of your people, and to grow players into leaders. The Crusaders Leadership Program lets you get up close and personal with some of the greatest rugby legends of all time. People like Sir Wayne Smith, Sam Whitelock, Kieran Read. You'll connect with a global group of ambitious, caring coaches from a range of codes and backgrounds. And most importantly, you'll gain skills and techniques to drive impact and outcomes for your team. The Crusaders Leadership Program is a 2-week, high-intensity virtual experience. It is delivered exclusively online, accessible from anywhere. Hunger and Heart listeners get 10% off the full price of the program. Use the code HUNGER at checkout. You can find out more about the Crusaders Leadership Program at crusadersleadership.com. That's crusadersleadership.com. Hunger and Heart is created by BOMA and the entire BOMA team, including Tito Bernal, Ray Jangle, Hannah Hudson, Johanna Coxon, Sunil Unka, and me, Kyla Colbin. Thanks for listening.